Welcome to Africa Insight. We decided this week that we are going to talk about the thing that pretty much everyone is talking about at the moment. That is the conflict in the Middle East. And when we put out a talking point first thing on Monday morning, discussing the impact. Of course, Africa is not directly impacted just yet, but there are multiple transmission mechanisms in which this escalating conflict is going to impact the continent. You want to discuss some of these?
Yeah, so just briefly, Louw, so when you just talk to the general public and people around you, I was talking to some friends and family, they don't quite understand that this will have an impact on Africa. Even though South Africa, we are geographically far away, but it still has an impact. So broadly speaking, on the economic side, the main thing is the oil price. So oil has just been jumping and jumping. As of recording, it's at $83 a barrel. Right. Our average forecasts were at around 62, but it's been revised to around $69 for
That's for the year.
For the year, yeah, correct. And we've built in some of the shock because it was anticipated that there would be strikes. But as we are following it, we don't know how long these strikes would be. So prolonged strikes could be in a higher oil price or not. But materially, how it affects you as a consumer is the goods are going to go up. Cost of living, we saw this with the Ukraine and Russia, but it just depends on how it is. So we've had a fuel increase in South Africa right now. Next month it could be 4 or 5 rand.
And of course the impact also on the currency side of things. Exactly. We've seen a rally in the dollar. Oil is purchased in dollar, as some other commodities, and some of this rally that we've seen for emerging economies is getting wiped out by the market responding.
Yeah, well, obviously, as you mentioned, emerging currencies are quite sensitive to these kinds of things. So the rand has lost some ground. So that's on the economic side in the most simplest form. I know we're trying to oversimplify it, but politics-wise, the first countries I can say that are really affected are the countries in the Horn, because they geographically are right close to a conflict. And they've all had varying statements. So, for example, pretty much all of them have condemned the attacks. But then, as you know, we always talk about your foreign policy, your statecraft, your interest. It all varies. So, just for an example, Egypt, for example, has condemned Iran's retaliation strikes when we all know that the US and Israel strike first.
Sure.
But this is also because Egypt has strategic ties with the US military economically, and it gets around about 60% of its natural gas from Israel. So,
that's right.
Let's toe that line. Then, for example, Ethiopia as well. They have a lot of the Ethiopians working in the Gulf, so they've also condemned it, but not said anything about the US strikes. But then there's a very interesting one with Somalia. Somalia have condemned all the strikes, but they've excluded the UAE because the UAE is backing the recognition of Somaliland.
Right.
So it varies. And then interestingly, for example, Kenya, for example, has said they oppose all of these strikes, but Kenya is an interesting one. It's a non-NATO ally to the US,
yes, that's right.
But it's also negotiating with Iran. So it's complicated, and the same thing in West Africa. Nigeria and Ghana have strongly opposed this because they've got strong counterterrorism partnerships with the US, but they also have relations with Iran and parts of that. So it's super complicated, and we're going to see this sort of shifting narrative over the next coming weeks, and I think that's a great departure point to talk about one of Africa's big powers, South Africa, who have a very complicated relationship in all of this.
So South Africa does find itself between a rock and a hard place here. The Department of International Relations and Cooperation has responded to the conflict. They've tried to respond in the most neutral language that they can, pointing out that both the Israeli and US strikes were against international law, but so too the retaliatory strikes by Iran. So a little bit of tap dancing, trying to condemn both sides. But it hardly matters considering our close relationship, South Africa's close relationship with Iran. And as we spoke earlier this week, it's rather extraordinary to think that the Iranian ships that participated in Exercise War for Peace in Cape Town, only in January, 2 of those ships, according to reports, have been sunk. It's really extraordinary to think the seamen that were involved with these exercises with our own Navy are potentially killed in these strikes. Ironically, of course, the UAE also participated in those drills. It was a Chinese exercise that was moved to South African waters for strategic purposes or logistical purposes, but it did put us in a bit of a spot. And so we kind of nailed our colors to the mast in early January, our relationship with Iran. Our generals have visited Iran multiple times over the last year, and very cordial relationships, and had put us in a bind. But then we also saw yesterday, and I have to actually read this, the Secretary General of the ANC decided in his infinite wisdom yesterday to tweet a picture of former President Nelson Mandela meeting Ayatollah Khomeini in Tehran back in the early 90s, saying, with the caption, "Two freedom fighters meet in Tehran, lest we forget prior to the Iranian Revolution, the Shah regime was a close ally of the apartheid regime," and finished it off by saying, "Shah's family was exiled and they were welcomed by the apartheid regime and to this day still own a house in Johannesburg. Again, an indication of the fact that the ANC, at the very least, view a lot of their geopolitical relationships not in terms of what the current situation is, but in terms of the historical support that the ANC received from this regime.
It's always important for them. They never forget their friends.
So this historical relationship with the Soviet Union, now this fealty towards Russia, the same with Iran. And it's a very complicated history in South Africa, of course, but as we said earlier in the week, perhaps this would be a good time for everyone to just keep their head below the parapet, and perhaps Mr. Mbalula should do that. We can sit this one out quite happily. We're already in the US's crosshairs, metaphorically speaking, and so we really don't need any situation now where our close relationship with Iran gives us long-term reasons to regret.
Yeah, very much so. I think that's an interesting one, and as we mentioned, balancing these interests will be important. Yeah, I think let's leave it at that.
I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining Africa Insight this week. If you'd like more information on our products or services, please visit our website or socials.